So we would like to welcome to the show the founder of Subbase, and he is an outstanding entrepreneur. We're very pleased to have him on the show. Let's welcome Eric Helitzer. Hello, Eric.
Hey, Henry. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, terrific. Well, the show is Entrepreneurs, Business, and Finance, and you are an entrepreneur uh, as of a couple of years ago. Um, but you didn't start out that way. Let's go back in time. I know you have a lot of training in the construction business because this is a software platform for construction specifically. We'll get more into that, but so obviously uh, it's very helpful to have the construction experience. And you start out with, I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile, a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from University of Florida, went on to have two pretty long-term jobs for large companies. And then you launched out, well, really 2.5 years ago to get this business going. And you have revenue and you have clients. You're based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but you are all over the country. It's not regionally based. So let's start with when you were a kid, did you ever think you'd be an entrepreneur?
When I was a kid, I didn't think I was going to be an entrepreneur. I knew very early, though, when I was a kid, that I wanted to be building, and I was sucked into the building space through three generations of contractors that really ingrained in me not just the hardworking aspects of working, but really how exciting the built world was. And that's where my career got kicked off, was in the built world through the relationships I had with my grandfather and my father, who are both in the built world.
Wow, well, that's interesting. Uh, and so that's probably what led you into an interest in construction at University of Florida, and then your first jobs as well.
Yeah, so
Um,
the real story here was when I was looking to apply for schools, I always knew I wanted to be a Gator. So for anyone watching your show, big Gator. So I had made a decision that I wanted to go to the University of Florida, and it just so happened that the University of Florida had a school there called the Rinker School of Construction Management, where people that wanted to pursue a career in construction management can actually do that. And a lot of people, when they heard I was going to apply, because it was a school within a school, they had no idea that you can pursue a career in construction. And growing up, seeing the business that my father had built with his partners, I definitely had an inclination to go. And when I graduated, this was at the time of the end of the boom. So it's kind of the time of the condo bust in Miami. I had spent an extra year in school getting a master's in construction, and my family business that was doing well told me that I was not allowed to work there until I really learned how to build, meaning go work in the field with the real trades, and they're going to show you how to build. And so we did that. And I started working right out of school with internships with a very large company at the time that was growing in the Miami market, came into the pre-construction world very early on and learned how to estimate, and then got my feet wet a little bit in operations. And at the time, there were, a lot of young people coming into the industry that allowed for technology to somewhat be a talking point back in the day. This is back in 2014, or really 2012, 2014, where people started to understand that you can actually start digitizing things that were very old school. And in 2014, the family business that was growing in the Miami market called me and said that they had a role for me. And that role consisted of not just being a part of running an operation on the field side, but they had new technology that they wanted me to look at. And one of the pieces of technology that they wanted me to look at, because I was one of the younger guys that just understood how to use an Excel, uh, it was called Procore. And Procore is now a publicly traded multi-billion dollar company that was just getting its feet off the ground in the South Florida market. And so when I went to the GC side, hopping from the subcontractor world, I wanted to learn how to build, obviously from the holistic view of managing the trades, not just focusing on one trade, which I did very well on the concrete space. But when I went to the general contractor, it was my job to get this tool off the ground. A lot of pushback from architects and other people in the field And essentially what we were doing was taking a very archaic workflow of managing RFIs and documentation and digitizing that and streamlining it along a workflow that everyone had collaboration and transparency with. Long story short, that's kind of where like the light bulb went off in my head to say, wow, this is really something that most people don't understand, but knowing how efficient it made the business, something that we should pursue stronger. And years went on, started to see a lot more technology adoption in the space. And that's where we came to a point where we had an opportunity to partner with a technical advisor of mine who wanted to get into the construction space, but didn't understand every nuance and facet of how construction worked. And so being in the industry now for 15 years prior to building Subbase, we understood where the pain points were in certain workflows that needed to be digitized that people didn't understand as well. And so we built it in-house. We got very little traction up front, and then eventually got to a point where people were coming to the office. I was trying to run multiple jobs at the company I was at while we're trying to build software. The two were merging together, but not enough for me to do good at either. So I had to choose a career path. And I chose the path of going into the entrepreneurship world of construction technology. And over 2 years later now, we have a fully built platform that is not changing the way that people manage materials, but giving them a sense of relief now that we've digitized a very, very archaic process for very large subcontractors and all of their material suppliers. So that's the story of how I came from school to construction and now into, technology.
That's fantastic. One of my first, well, my first job out of college was construction, and not even tablets, clipboards, uh,
Yeah.
and later Excel spreadsheets. But that's been a while ago now. But yeah, the technology that's coming along, and thank goodness that we have you, and we had some other people on the show attacking different parts of pre-construction and construction management, um, because technology can make a massive difference in efficiencies. And for some reasons, why do you think construction has been somewhat slow to adopt compared to other types of businesses? Am I overstating that? Because that's my
No, you're not.
experience.
No,
Yeah.
it is hard to adopt. And I think the reason why it's hard to adopt is, well, the first reason that I've seen is every project is different. So even though that the workflows could be similar, every project, no matter if it is even building similar towers on the same piece of property, has its different nuances, and it's very people oriented. People have a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of different stakeholders, and with the customization of how products are built, it makes it hard to wedge your way in up front unless you, A, understand a big problem, and B, can wedge yourself in without changing the way that it's always been done. You do have, the sense of, an older school mentality who is so used to running for many years profitable businesses. And so when you have a profitable business that's working, sometimes you're afraid of change because if it doesn't work out, which sometimes it doesn't, these business owners become reluctant to seeing something new because they're comfortable in their ways. But I would think that there's a couple of reasons why, and I think the biggest one is because of the customization in construction. Every project is different. Every project has its challenges, which sometimes makes it difficult to build software around that at front.
Well, the nice thing about what you're doing too is that there's also a risk to changing something that's working in the actual construction aspect, because years later, the old way has been tested. They've been doing it a long time, but you might not find out there's a problem in this new type of material or product or way to build until a few years, and you've got this big structure. Now you've got to deal with the problem.
Yeah. And what happens is you really get your early adopters who you get, you know, not just to convince, but at some point you have to educate them on the problem up front because what they see is an opportunity, but they also see it as a big risk. And so part of the problem that we saw was how do you get people to really adopt something new that may not even be fully built yet? And that's where you had to kind of dial in deep to the pain of the business. We knew the pains up front, especially in materials. And some of the pains that we attacked very fast, very quickly were on the accounting front. We know that for the most part, most subcontractors that are a certain size are seeing so much, invoice pieces of paper coming to their office that have to eventually get reconciled to get put into their books. And so we thought, how can we affect, the P&L and make it better? And so that's where we started to build faster, was knowing that we can actually affect bottom lines, which would drive essentially adoption of new technologies to help streamline these businesses. But it's definitely not an overnight success as far as, hey, you're just going to build something great and people are going to come flocking to you. You have to do your research, but you also have to present technology in the construction world in a way that people actually can understand. Each trade has different lingos. Each trade may even have different workflows for the most part. And you also have to interact on the material side with all their vendors. And so that's the approach we took, was, wedge yourself into a workflow that you can not change, but make it easier. And then eventually get to, like, how can you not just save the company time, but how are you affecting the actual profit and loss statements of these companies?
Some of the so I did actually have a contracting business too, home building, and I found even different parts of the country, the terminology was different. Because
Yes,
my first job was for a big home builder in the Northeast, DC, Texas. They're saying words for things that I figured out, but it was different. So let's try this. Explain in layman's terms to folks that maybe aren't necessarily in the construction business how this helps, and then let's maybe do a deep dive for some construction folks about two or three, one or two, how many issues you think could be nice to explain how this really helps. I mean,
yeah,
I know from my experience, it could really help. The spreadsheets, the invoices, gives me a
sure.
headache thinking about it.
So,
Yeah.
so layman terms is pretty simple. We take a very archaic, a very manual, and a very disparate workflow of material management, from requesting in the field, sending out quotes, tracking purchase orders, and then invoice reconciling under one hood that connects every stakeholder along the way. A single purchase in construction, no matter a box of nails or, $10 million worth of different design mixes of concrete, touches multiple stakeholders along the way. Each stakeholder has different needs, different priorities. A superintendent in the field may not care as much about where this specific line item is going to be cost coded in the project manager's budget. A purchasing manager has all these requests coming in and may want to buy certain things from a vendor. A controller, cares about getting invoices with the proper documentation to get back into their accounting system. So that's just one piece. And then all the other vendors that you work with is what we tie into the simplicity of the system. Vendors have a major problem too that we're solving for, which is, hey, how do I get better data on my own clients to help service them better? And how do I actually service a client who is ordering at such frequent volumes in order to give them the best experience possible? And so that's what Subbase does. We connect every stakeholder in the process by, doesn't matter trade, we're pretty trade agnostic, but we do understand the lingos. But most of all, we understand the flexibility that's needed to tie in the field, the office, the vendors, and the accounting teams in one hood. So that's what Subbase does.
So with that adoption, I imagine that there's always a little bit of work, a little bit of cost to get over the hump to where you have less work and less cost. So, and that's probably one of the hurdles, you've already been talking about it really, but to get people to go ahead and take that hurdle, you want to talk about some success stories on that?
Sure. Yeah, and that's actually a good point to talk about when it comes to the friction of technology adoption. When we started building Subbase, we knew very early on that for most of the subs, and we sell to subcontractors and self-performing GCs, but subcontractors who are, the reason why buildings get built is because of the subs. The subs hold the risk of the labor and material, and we knew that if you're going to introduce new software to them, you have to at least be able to implement a system like Subbase in 1 day or less. So we actually took the approach up front to be able to come in on site in 1 day, be able to have your cost codes ready, your materials, your vendors are ready to go, so that you can in 1 day start ordering from Subbase. That is literally the value prop that we have on our platform. And we knew that because implementation of software in construction, I saw it, is very difficult. It's difficult because of the different parties, but it's also difficult because most people are not used to software. They're used to email, text, Excel. So how do you bridge the gap? We do that by making a frictionless experience, making the user interface very simple so that someone can come in from day one and start ordering. Now, where we've seen success as far as adoption is, from a top-down approach. We really like to start in the accounting areas of the controllers, the CFOs, any business owner that understands the risk of materials that affect their balance sheet is where we like to start. And the reason we do that is because there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of problems on the back office of these accounting systems or these construction companies that are doing big volume. Some of the companies that we work with are doing extremely large volume. And in order for them to keep up with that, they need a system to centralize the data flow. And so we've started by making it frictionless, onboarding, implementing, and then ultimately to see the value as far as the 10x that we provide, linking into their accounting systems so that they don't have to change what they're doing today. That's a big value prop of ours. We'll pretty much meet you into any system today. And that's been done for now a couple of months. We have, released even more accounting integrations, knowing that most contractors are not going to move off their accounting systems. So
we've both been around long enough to know that it's not always that easy. And people like to hear about some challenges that
oh yeah,
you may have overcome, because if there haven't been some, then you didn't really start the business. I know you did. You
for
have
sure.
customers
Yeah.
up and working and happy. So
Yeah.
share a war story or two, and construction has lots of war stories to start with.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of war stories I like to share is, well, the first one being that when we first started building Subbase, we I guess one of the biggest mistakes we didn't make, I'll go back first, was we were given the software away for free up front a lot. And we were trying to do this to get adoption. And we did get some adoption there. But what we saw was that when you gave something away for free that wasn't fully built out, it didn't really solve enough of the pain points for our users to really go the full mile. And we started to reiterate on how we wanted to charge for the piece of software, which is something that we've dialed into today. But one of the biggest question marks that people had was around, their bringing on these subs and I'm sorry, their vendors, and bringing on all these people that just, didn't not just know what software was or how to use it, but they were afraid that, being connected to one source would provide a lot of visibility, maybe some too much visibility. And
Oh,
so what we
yeah.
realized was, how do we make an experience for both sides of the platform that the visibility actually was good for them? And we started diving deeper into like how to solve that problem. And what we came to was the fact that, with better visibility and those that are looking and willing to adopt technology, especially on the vendor side, the subs that are tied into their accounting systems now see that vendors that are on Subbase are responding faster, right? They're getting more orders out. They're actually being able to, make a better line of communication with their vendors and vice versa. Now that you do have visibility in the market up front, there's very much times where vendors or other people that don't necessarily like visibility, you know, push back a little bit and they want to understand, well, why do I have to be in a system? Email are working just fine. But those types of people don't understand that things are not just working fine for some of these larger companies that are struggling to keep up with everything. So what we wanted to do up front was make sure that we were being very transparent in the message we were sending to people that, listen, Subbase isn't here to take away business, right? We're not introducing visibility for people to undercut people. We're introducing visibility to strengthen the relationship that's already existed for years and will exist. It's a very relationship-based construction or, platform, and construction in general is very relationship-based. So we really had to get the message around to make sure that people understand that we are the bridge to help enhance the relationship and not take a relationship away because now we've introduced technology that wasn't there before. And so our deep understanding of the industry and our ability to speak to both sides of the platform in that way allowed us to get over that hump. And now that vendors come on in droves with their subs, they could start to see now the value of being able to respond faster. And ultimately, responding faster not just wins you more jobs and wins you more orders, but it builds a relationship deeper that the competition who's not on the system can't attest to. So that would be like the biggest, I guess, hurdle we had to overcome first when it was dealing with technology in between this workflow that's been established for many years.
And from talking to you in the past too, you've had good support. Initial investor, was it your company that you were
Yeah,
working for? So you have people that think this is a good idea that are behind you that perhaps can give you some advice, or you go talk to them, how's this working? not to mention just your clients.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
we had from day one taken investment from only the inner circle of people that knew where we were headed and believed in the mission of, what we were solving for on the material side. And we, up until recently, hadn't raised an institutional round of funding until a couple months ago. So we got ourselves around a great group of people, really local in South Florida, which is one of the biggest construction markets in the country. And we wanted to first prove many things about the system. And the company that first started to invest in us invested in the idea, in the vision, and obviously the team that we were putting around myself, without a single order going through the platform. So they were truly visionaries. And the investors that came along in the early days, which was over 2 years ago now, knew that this was a problem. They knew how big the problem was, but obviously there is risk involved for us to figure it out pretty quick. And they had a very tight deadline to do so. This wasn't an open checkbook where, hey, we're just going to keep funding this forever. So we had to get to a
there
certain
is.
point where we're able to prove not just that we can solve a problem, but that we can get real clients that are also willing to pay for the software. Once we had that, we also had to prove out more on the milestones of the product, where we were with integrations. And then, like I said, recently, as of this year, we did raise an institutional round of funding that now has allowed us to move faster, expand the product into areas that we have coming up in this year on the roadmap. And yeah, they were the true visionaries behind it as well, that saw where this could go, and they've been backing us since literally, I would say, ground zero, but it was before ground zero, before we had much code out there.
They took a chance.
Yes.
You took a chance. Did it feel like you were taking a chance at the time, or you felt pretty
So
confident, pretty excited most of the time?
yeah, I definitely would be lying to you if I didn't, if I wasn't nervous up front to understand. But we knew, uh, because of our expertise in the industry and because of the fact that we had people interested, we knew that there was a problem and that, there still is a problem. So yeah, we had very good conviction that we were going to be able to execute. And now it really does come down to really just executing at the highest level, because we do understand where the problems are. We're expanding the product in those areas too that we don't touch today. But yeah, I mean, any true entrepreneur, I think, would be lying if they said that they weren't somewhat nervous to take a step away from a very amazing job. Didn't have to worry much about, where my career would go over the next 10 years or 5, 10, 20 years, to pivoting quickly and, taking people's money who personally, was, hard to sleep at night if that money went bye-bye. But that really is what makes us not just tough, but really made us work hard to understand that when we do build, we're building for the right purpose. And yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Well, even the toughest warriors with all their medals in battle, literally life and death, they always say they were afraid. Not that they didn't execute, but and not at every moment. But
Yeah.
if you're human, uh, it's
Yeah,
easier
and
to stay
listen,
at the company maybe sometimes.
I agree, and I think you need fear in certain ways because it also teaches you that, especially as an entrepreneur in this stage, um, you can't be afraid of failure. I think people that are afraid to fail, they don't fail, and therefore they may think they're always doing the right thing. We've already seen failures, and we've learned from it very fast in terms of product, and even in terms of selling clients that are just not in our ICP, who would be our ideal client. So for us, it was really, how fast can we move to make sure it's going to work, and then once it does work, double down on that. And we did that from the early get go, and we're very, very metrics driven as well, to make sure that what we build actually is serving a purpose for users on the platform today, and not just building software because we think it's cool.
Probably is cool. I know it's cool, but hey, yeah, that won't get you too far
Yeah.
um, by itself. So competitors, what is the competition? Sometimes it's just the old way of doing business. I don't know if you have other people that are competing directly with you, or share some bit about that.
Yeah, the biggest competitor that we run up to is, there's two. It's Microsoft Excel and Dash email and culture, like construction culture. That's the biggest thing we're running up to right now. There are some in the space that are building in the procurement space because of how large and fragmented the space is. It's a huge multi-hundred billion dollar space that is very fragmented. So there's some that are coming up that are trying to build in different segments of the space, not just residential, but the commercial space. You've got different size tiers that people are trying to build for. But the biggest piece of competition that we're seeing every day is, hey, Eric, like this Excel spreadsheet's amazing. My emails, my Dropbox, my file folders, like we have a system in place. So you have to really be able to dive deep into, those systems with them and show not just the 10x value, but how those systems over time, are just not what's going to take your company to the next level, given what's going on in the industry. So that would be our biggest competition, is me explaining to a lot of people the difference between a sub base and let's call it their in-house Excel and workflows they have.
You've used the expression a few times. I think it's a good one. 10x.
Yes,
You want to add on that a little bit? Is that the
sure.
return on investment kind of thing?
So return on investment, it's kind of thing like that. So when we say 10x, and this is really just something we've seen, is most people don't want to change their way unless you're providing that 10x experience. So providing a 2x, meaning, oh, I'm doing double, right? I'm making you 2 times more efficient, is good, but sometimes it's not enough to make them make that switch. And so our team knows that when we build and we grow the system, anything we do has to be that much better of an experience. It's got to be getting you to a 10x, because without a 10x, it sometimes lets companies not, it makes companies afraid to make the switch because, well, you're doing all this great and my PL log is great, but if it doesn't fully integrate with this system, right, then it just doesn't solve all my problems. And to get them over that hump is really the biggest thing, because the analogy I've used was, and I've used this a couple times, is a lot of contractors are riding bikes uphill, and the bike they've been riding for 20 years has been working, right? They're getting the job done. It's hard, but you know what? The bike's still going. Maybe they have to lube the chains a little, maybe put some air in the tire, but hey, man, it's been working. And then you pull up and you say, hey, but I got this great car. Look at this 911 Turbo S, this Porsche. And they're looking at it like, man, this is great. Like, wow, this is going to get me there faster. It's really going to give me a better experience. And they open up the car and they say, Eric, man, I can't drive this. What about the Tiptronic? Like, I need to have this for me to get off my bike to be able to jump in this car, because I don't know. It could work, it could not work. And so that jump from, 2x to 10x is what we're looking at. We're not looking at making the experience better. We're looking at making it like exponentially better. And that's why we use the phrase 10x, because that's sometimes what it takes to get people to move and change in this industry.
Fantastic. Yeah, and so that would translate to, uh, I'll do a quick summary and then you add to it, but happier employees, their life is easy, not as frustrating. Efficiency means you can do more work, the same number of people, and you're not having problems are what really drive everyone crazy. You're not having the same level of problems where your invoices aren't matching your takeoffs, and I could go on. And there's probably more.
Yeah, and here's a great example. Like when we first started building our invoice module, so our invoice module takes in invoices from your vendors. We utilize artificial intelligence to pair it to a PO, fill out your log for you. And that was the first phase. And everyone was like, oh, that's great. But in order for us to now come here, we want to also check the line items to make sure the line items, because I'm still looking line by line. So we said, great, we'll build it. Then we knew we were going to do it, but we pulled it ahead of the roadmap. And so now we built something where invoice does come in, we pair, we extract the data, and now we'll go line by line, right? And that line by line gives you the ability to automate a task that is being done manual. But in order for you to switch and get over the hump, you want to see it do everything. And so that's what we're building for. We're not just building for, a piece of the workflow. We're building for it to be exponentially better. And we've seen the success there. It does work.
Well, I wish you had been there with this technology 25 years ago when I had my relatively small custom home building company, because I
Yeah.
know it would have helped. So I congratulate you. I'm just know you're already helping a lot of people and continue to help more. Would you is there anything you'd like to kind of wrap up with in particular?
Yeah, I think in general, well, thank you for having me on. I think the biggest message that I think is important for the industry, in the construction industry, is a lot of people look at software today as an expense without thinking about the return on investment. And that's a lot of what we do too, is the education of what does it actually cost you today to, process an invoice, process a purchase order, communicate with your vendors in these ways, versus how much can we save you on the time and the dollars, and what does that do for you as a business in whole? And so that's really what we're, helping with people, is getting them to look, when they look at software, as not an expense, but actually as an ROI up and down the chain, right? Owners that are building huge buildings should be able to, request that they're using subs and GCs that are using the best tools. Everyone out there is using great tools in the field, but sometimes the tools in the back office are just not to standard yet. And so that's what we love about this, is being able to explain ourselves and how we drive ROI for companies that are growing just as fast as the next. And there's a lot of work out there still. So super excited to be in the industry. And honestly, that's going to change over the next 5 to 10 years. From what we're seeing today to where it's going to go is going to be awesome.
So Entrepreneurs Business and Finance, Eric Helitzer is the CEO and founder of Subbase. The domain name is subbase.com. And if they would like to,
.io. Sorry.
.io, sorry about
Yep.
that. Yep, subbase.io, which is good because it's tech and that's what IO is for.
Yep.
And if they want to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do that, and to your company?
Yeah, so they can go right on our website, www.subbase.io. They can fill out a contact form, or we're very active on LinkedIn. They can follow us on LinkedIn. They can follow myself on LinkedIn, and I can give my email. It's Eric, ERIC, at subbase.io. We're always talking to users. Anyone that's interested in what we're doing, we'd love to chat.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks, Henry.